Hey, what's up? My name is Rob Paone, and welcome to the Proof of Talent podcast, the show where we talk about everything related to the career journey within the blockchain, crypto, and Web3 space. Today, we have a great guest. It is Greg Clayman from Chapter 1, and this episode is really packed with information for early stage founders, as well as employees at early stage companies who are involved in the hiring process. Greg occupies a very interesting role within the crypto space. He has operated as a talent partner at both A16Z and now Chapter 1. And in his role, he helps to advise and support a variety of companies, portfolio companies for Chapter 1 right now in their recruiting and hiring processes. So he has some fantastic advice for early stage founders, for people involved in the hiring decision. And if you are a job seeker, it's also worth hearing the thought process that Greg has and some of the advice that he gives as well. I think you'll also be interested in hearing that. Before we hop into the episode, just want to let you know that if you are job seeking right now, feel free to go to the links in the YouTube description and the podcast description. Feel free to reach out to us at Proof of Talent. We are a recruiting firm that works exclusively within the blockchain, crypto, and Web3 space. Or if you are hiring for your company or looking for support in the hiring process, we are here to help out as well. Would love to talk to you. Again, a link for that will also be in the YouTube and podcast description. Now, let's hop into that conversation with Greg Clayman from Chapter 1. Your first role in this space was at Chronicled, correct?
Correct. Yep.
With that position, so you were in internal HR and then you've been in the VC world since then. What was working in the internal crypto HR recruiting land like?
Yeah, so I joined Chronicled from Google. And so at Google, obviously wasn't working in blockchain. I was on Google Cloud team working, hiring sales engineers and solutions architects and those sorts of people. Specifically wanted to get into the blockchain space. So this is 2017, 2018, around when Bitcoin really popped. And there's always like those people at those companies that are like really into crypto and just bugging everyone else on the team about it. And that was one of my teammates.
That was me.
Yeah, and that's exactly like how everyone got into the space. So I started looking around. Chronicled at the time seemed interesting. They were doing like, it was distributed ledger technology, track and trace type stuff. And the role itself was all encompassing everything. It was HR, recruiting, compensation. And so I think now I tell people like I wouldn't go back to an HR role. And I think that HR and recruiting need to be separate functions, but that's probably a different conversation. Mostly because when you're doing internal HR in the blockchain and crypto space, like your job becomes more HR than recruiting. So my first day at Chronicle, the CEO came to me and said like, hey, we have a few people who didn't get their visa in the recent H-1B lottery. So we need to find a spot for them to work. Can we get an office in Vancouver immediately? And so I spent my whole first day, like before doing any like onboarding stuff or any like paperwork or filling out like the I-9 stuff, like literally trying to find office space to house people in Vancouver. And so I think it was like 6:30 or 7:30 the night of like the first Monday that we were able to find an office space, move people in. And at that point, it's like, oh, this is what internal HR at a blockchain company is like. It's like everything is last minute. We're going to scramble. I guess like just to like, wrap up the story. I was only at Chronicled about 4 months or so, but I always like tell people I probably accomplished more there than I did like any other job. The office space was a big win. Like did a lot of visa paperwork with our lawyers and worked a lot with like the government in Canada because our solution at the point was to hire people from like Ukraine and Belarus and Eastern Europe and relocate them. So had to work with the government of Canada going through legal compliance of posting jobs there. And that was a lot of my time. And so internal HR in blockchain space, not like sexy or glamorous or anything, but a lot of just like background work and legal and compliance and basically the same thing that founders are going through, trying to make sure that their companies are legit and legal. We were doing the same thing on the people front, making sure that our people could actually work legally.
Beyond Chronicled, so I think, from like our point of view at Proof of Talent, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this space is obviously like the VC land, but like your role in particular and your background in particular is really interesting from what you've done at A16Z and now Chapter 1. Would love to hear about the role at A16Z, how you found that and what you did there.
Yeah, so I mentioned that Chronicled was only about 4 months, and I guess like we're going to go raw and uncut. I don't want to say I was bait and switched when joining, but it was definitely promised like a lot of things that weren't true. And one of them was really the financial situation at Chronicle. So when I joined, we were looking to raise a round, and the company pivoted literally like 3 or 4 times in the few months that I was there, trying to find product market fit, whether we should do like pharmaceutical track and trace or work with oil or work with wine and like provenance stuff like that. So the whole time we're pitching investors, and I'm on the other side of the coin, going to these meetings and just explaining our vision for talent and hiring and what we're doing on the people side. Chronicle pitched A16Z, which was a hard pass for them, and like rightfully so at the time. And but that said, it got me interested because this was right when A16Z had raised their first crypto fund. This is summer 2018, and I was connected with Eric Thomas over there, who I had previously sort of worked with when I was at Imager, which was an A16Z investment. So, I mean, TLDR is that everything is just networking and connection. So I pinged Eric after Chronicle pitched A16Z and messaged on LinkedIn and basically said, hey, like, I'm not sure if you're looking for, recruiters for this new fund, but I'd love to throw my hat in the ring. And Eric responded pretty quickly and was like, yeah, let's have a chat. Like at the time, there were very few people doing any sort of recruiting in the Web3 space. And so I guess I kind of just got lucky in right place, right time. And somehow that all worked out, and that was a pretty good decision. And it's a lot better being on this side, on the VC side. It's always busy, but it's a different type of busy, and I really like that, and like being able to see what's going on in the industry and have a pulse on that. So like that really inspired me to make the move. Is like rather than use all my manpower working on one company and scaling them, it's how can we help the industry succeed in general. And with something pretty nascent like Web3, that was just like really appealing. Is like, how can we just level everyone up and make everyone better? So kind of a no-brainer to join.
I feel like every time I have a conversation with Greg, I'm just deeply inspired, and like it's something new. You're always up to something great, and like you said, it's all about the relationship aspect, and it's good that you kept in touch with Eric over at A16Z. I'm curious to hear more, like, what was it like pivoting from internal? Because it sounds like up to that point, you'd never worked for a VC firm yet.
Right.
And that's a whole portfolio of companies to support. What was it like making that pivot, and kind of how did that day-to-day differ?
Yeah, the one thing we discussed at A16Z a lot were like, who are our customers? Who are our clients? Is it the LPs? Is it the founders? Is it the candidates we're dealing with? And so I think that's like the big difference between working internally at a VC firm and working at a company. Like when you're in-house, you want to make your company the best. You want to make sure that you're hiring the best people so that you can succeed and that everything works out well, and we're all going to, we're in this together. At the VC firm, again, it's more of that like view of the industry itself. And so like, I'm not incentivized or like on a commission base to like throw a bunch of crap at the wall and see what sticks. It's really like, how can we match the right people at the right time with the right company? And so like in terms of like what I was doing there, I don't think like talent roles in VC are as glamorous as people think. Like on the recruiting front, it's a lot of sourcing. And so
what actually, so like we could take a step back. Not everybody either knows it or like it's kind of unique and maybe something newish. Like what exactly is a talent partner at a VC? Like what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, great question. And so I think it's everything from helping companies find candidates. And I tell people like a lot of my job is playing professional best friend and professional evangelist and just like hyping up, companies and candidates and being a matchmaker. But like in reality, it's a lot of sourcing. And so like the big tech companies separate recruiters and sourcers and have like early career people source and pass things to recruiters who get all the glory and whatnot and take all this success on their side. And I like a lot of what I do, I think would be what like the sourcers at Google or a Facebook do. And it's just reaching out, finding people in unique backgrounds and having those conversations. That I think is a small piece of the job, but it's probably the most time consuming. The larger piece is really being like the trusted advisor to the founders. So like I always say that my goal is to take all the people stuff off the founder's shoulders so they can go back and focus on what they're good at, which is building. Some of the things that like we'll do here on like a day-to-day is I'll hold like hands-on sourcing sessions with the founders and really just go through real-time collaboration and figure out like how we can find high-quality candidates and who matches. And from there, we can create like hiring templates and interview loops and set up internal recruiting infrastructure. From that to like the nitty-gritty of actually like writing the job descriptions and just kind of like publicizing them across social media channels. And I'll help with interview questions. I've helped design take-home assignments. I'll jump in, on final round interviews with people and kind of assess on the culture fit side, because the founders we invest in are generally technical. And then I guess the other big piece is like evaluating different recruiting agencies and tools they can use to like just enhance their own resources. Like my bandwidth is pretty limited, given that, we're overseeing right now like 25 companies. A16Z when I left was 105 or so. And so the idea is like, making connections with people who can make their lives easier. And so I want to make sure that I'm connected to the best people in the space, again, like a proof of talent, that can just supplement everything that they're doing and just really like make their lives a lot easier on the hiring front or on the people front, so that, everyone is kind of working towards this goal of either launching a product or IPO or fundraise. And like, how do we get the best people in their corner for that? So I'm just kind of like the people aggregator on my side. In that journey, right, you're advising different founders. Do you find them to be like very receptive to help on the talent side? Sometimes. I think, and I think going ahead, like to, advice that I'd give founders, and we can cover this later too, but I think most of the founders that we talk to, and I guess just generally, they don't know what they don't know. And so if I mention something like, I don't, necessarily have the bandwidth or have the expertise to hire like a quant developer, but here's someone who knows that space and here's a contingency-based firm you should talk to. There's a lot of pushback. It's like, I've worked with recruiters before and they don't help, blah, blah, blah. So the ones who aren't receptive to feedback generally aren't doing as well. And like the biggest secret I always tell founders, and I actually took this from Chris Dixon at A16Z, is like, we don't care if you're going to spend $40,000, $50,000, whatever, to hire someone game changing. We're going to care a lot more if you go like 6 to 8 months and not hire anyone, burn runway, be at the same place you were when you started. Like, don't worry about making us happy by nickel and diming people. Like, get the best people and everything else kind of falls into place. So are they always receptive? Not always, but I think a lot of it is just kind of experience and making sure that, they learn from their mistakes and not really like punishing them, but kind of just guiding them and making them see, here's the result of what happened or what didn't happen from your inaction. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think we could probably take this in a couple different directions, but we'll stick on maybe things that early stage or could be a little bit beyond early stage, but like other kind of missteps or errors that you might see in the hiring process from early stage companies or early stage founders. Like, is there anything else that stands out as something that is easily correctable for early stage founders when they are going through a hiring process? With a lot of early stage companies, I feel like there's two directions. And one is like hire people that you've worked with before and have conviction on and that are just in your network and make sure you're using that extended network for your first few hires. And I always recommend that route first. And I think that's great. At the same time, that can create a lot of just like sameness in the company. And so one of the things that I've always done, and this was, I guess, going back to A16Z, is making sure we have partnerships with different like DAOs or organizations that are working on like building diverse pipelines. And so I think there's times where founders will be really set in their ways. And it's like, I want a Stanford grad who has a CS degree, who's worked at Facebook and Google. And the problem is what they've been doing doesn't translate to building a 2 or 3 person company. And so it's the same with talent. I hear this a lot too. And I like reiterate this, the person who can help you build a company from like 0 to 20 people is going to be a lot different than someone who's managing a talent process from like 100 plus people. And so there's certain people that work in certain stages. And when founders come to me, when early stage founders come to me and say, hey, we're looking to hire our first engineer, we want someone who's built this at Google and Snapchat and whatnot. And there's nothing on the other side that says like, why would this person be successful? That's just a huge red flag for me. And so I spend a lot of time educating on that piece. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I feel like, especially since being in the talent space, like I feel like founders should probably do more of a due diligence, like preparing for searches and like actually doing some back end work within their internal team. Like, what are we looking for? What's the right type of candidate? I mean, is that something you typically would advise on as well, as like putting some systems in place before every search so that it is like a successful process, whether working with an agency or just doing it with someone like yourself? Yeah, I think that calibration piece is super important. And I guess I can steal this from A16Z, so I'll give them a shout here too. But one of the things that Jeff Stump, who runs executive talent over there, did when he first started like 12, 13 years ago was develop a process called a MOC, so mission, outcomes, and competencies. And until a founder starts that MOC document with them, they don't engage on any executive searches. They literally go through, say, fill out this like 2-page document. What's the mission that you're trying to achieve? What's like the outcome of this, and what competencies do these people need to have? And just kind of going through that process helps them really figure out, oh, I guess we didn't need someone from Google. We need someone who knows how to scale infrastructure and has built from 0 to 1. And maybe a kid coming out of school, maybe someone with 20 years experience, but it really like opens people up to, or opens up their understanding of like what the market looks like and what's out there. And so do a lot of that. Yeah, it's really tough to, I guess the founders who are very dead set on having a specific person for a specific role to solve a specific niche, I'll suggest they use consultants for something like that. I've been doing that a lot with smart contract developers, to be honest, because I don't see a lot of like long-term success with people saying we need to hire a smart contract dev. They build one thing and then they have nothing else for them. So it really is thinking beyond and like how you want to build the company and the culture at that point. And so do you need mercenaries? Do you need long-term people who are going to stay here and build a company? That's kind of what I want to help them think through.
Yeah, I think the thought process too, even like when you were talking about a founder saying, I want, because we hear it a lot too, I want somebody from Stanford or XYZ Ivy League school, and they need to have worked at Facebook or Google or Snapchat, whatever it might be. And I want them to join my 3-person company. And I also want to pay them 40% of what they're making at Snapchat. I think a lot of times founders have to think about the incentives behind things too, because there are, and that's what I tell people as well, is there are only so many people in the world that are going to fit that exact profile, number one, because there's only so many of those individuals that have that level of talent or background or pedigree. But then there is also only so many of those people that are willing to accept a potential pay cut, and then that believe in your company enough to where the upside of the equity or the token justifies making that move. And so at that point in time, you've narrowed it down to the 3 people in the world that are potentially interested in exactly what you're doing for that exact rate. And then you have to find them at the exactly right time. It's like trying to widen the net just a little bit in terms of like broadening that thinking.
Yeah, it's not an easy job, right? So, yeah, I agree. I think like the education piece, and I like intentionally put that in my title on LinkedIn too, as talent and education. And the education piece, I think, is huge for these founders, and especially in the Web3 space where you got to have a lot of first-time founders and a lot of like people who skew younger. It's a big piece of just the learning process for them. So yeah, I think that comes up a lot, is just having them understand like what incentive would I, as a founding engineer, have to join your company, take on all the risk, and not have any of the upside that you're taking as the founder. So that's like a big piece to think through, and a big like thing that I push back on a lot. So yeah, totally understand like that frustration that comes from helping them find that role.
I think that might be one of the biggest challenges for founders in Web3 as well too, is like finding the right people that can fully commit to their passion, right? Like the best teams that we see out there have, previously those leaders probably already scaled a business, came from like amazing backgrounds, amazing companies. And some of these earlier and younger founders, they don't have that leverage as much. So it's like really figuring out what's your value proposition and like what can you give, from your company that's really going to attract, engineer from Consensus or someone from OpenSea. And so it's like, yeah, really, really defining, like you said, your mission too, right? I think it has to be more clear than ever when you're going to go and hire someone, because if it's not, you're going to miss out on a really good person.
Yeah. Oh, 1,000%. When we look at founders, we kind of define it with like freshman founders versus senior founders. And I guess like I should probably pull data instead of just saying like this is what I'm observing. But like it seems that the senior founders and the people that either come from Web 2 backgrounds or have started a company before seem to be doing a bit better right now, just because they have those battle scars. But at the same time, like that, I don't want to discredit like the like really smart 20, 22-year-olds that are starting these companies, because I mean, they know far more than I do about this world. It's just there's always some like maturing that has to go into actually building a company beyond like, here's a great product I want to build, versus like, here's how you scale a company. And ideally, like that's where we come in and we say, like, if we have a team of early stage or early career founders, here's like a senior person or an advisor that we can pair you with and make sure that everything balances out. So those are the companies I see doing the best, is the ones who understand that they don't know all the answers right away and they're going to need some external help.
Yeah, it's funny because I think one of the names that popped into my head as you're talking through this, because we see that too. There's a lot of times younger, maybe like first roll out of school, have come from an incredible pedigree, first roll out of school, come into hiring and founding a company, have a little bit of trouble hiring or just like conceptualizing the hiring process because they really haven't done it before. And some of them have never even had a real like full-time job post-college before they started their own company. But like somebody on the flip side that I think like kind of defies that in some cases, like Hayden from Uniswap, I think had a job professionally like as an engineer for a few years, but was never like a founder before Uniswap. And now Uniswap's a multi-billion-dollar project with, I think 100+ employees. So I think there's no one size fits all. But I mean, for me, even before starting Proof of Talent, I worked at a number of different companies for like 8+ years. And half my management is just knowing what I like that other people used to manage me did, and knowing what I didn't like, and just kind of using that and being like, all right, I've experienced this before.
Yeah, 100% agreed. And that's sort of like going back to Chronicled and like the HR roles. It was pulling like all the stuff that didn't work at like a large company like Google, or I was at Zynga when it was growing too. Like, what didn't work there that could work well here, and what worked well that I can take with me. And I've done the same with Chapter One. A lot of the stuff from Andrews and Horowitz was pretty well built out, and so and it worked. And then to the point with Hayden, I agree. I worked with Hayden pretty early, and we knew him before, I guess, he started Uniswap, or before they were even fundraising. And one thing that's stuck out to me was he was invited to one of our like compliance regulatory talks. And even during that, he had his laptop up and he was working on the product. And like, it's people like that are so focused on what they're building and have so much conviction. Like, that sort of person is certainly like who I want to be aligned with as like an early stage investor. And when A16Z invested in Uniswap, one of the things that they did well is we were able to partner him with like a really strong COO at the time, MC, and just like more senior leadership, so that he could really build a product and they could focus more on like the actual company building part. So I don't know. I think Uniswap did it right for sure.
What avenues of success like do you see? Are there certain like places where companies are having a lot of success, whether it is, I know you've mentioned like agencies like Proof of Talent, there's if there's other consultancies, websites, like what's kind of working right now for these companies?
I go back to, like you said, like the agencies like Proof of Talent. So I guess part of it is I don't understand why companies, and this goes for like a good majority of our portfolio as well, are reluctant to utilize contingency-based recruiting agencies. Like, there's no cost to them. You're receiving top talent. I still get a lot of pushback, and I wonder if they just don't understand the model or not. But the idea of like, here's someone who is like uniquely positioned to identify the top talent, bring you top people, and have this almost like on a platter for you. Like, that seems to be the best way to go about it. Like, what I do is very generalized. It's when I talk to people, it's on behalf of Chapter One and our and our firm, not on behalf of individual portfolio companies. And I think I have to reiterate that every conversation with the founders is like, yes, I can help you hire, X developer like for your company, but you're going to be better off speaking with someone who can be like a dedicated account rep for you. Just given that we don't have a single company with in-house recruiting talent in our portfolio right now because they're all early stage. So that, I think, is a great avenue. What I've been doing lately with companies like Spindle, who are doing like a lot of like Web3 attribution and data, is I've been going through like Dune wizards lists and trying to identify like who these anonymous Dune wizards are and reaching out to them, seeing if they have any interest in going in-house. And that's worked. Spindle's hired a couple of Dune wizards who are like truly like anonymous, and they don't know who these people are, but they do good work. So I feel like there's always like a new avenue to go down that people are discovering. Like, I know like when I first started my career, it was like GitHub repositories and finding GitHub email addresses. And then we moved to Twitter for a bit. And now it seems to be Dune and spaces like that where people can contribute and show like referenceable work. So I'd still recommend, recruiting agencies first, and then maybe some of these like obscure places like a Dune site second.
Can you explain what a Dune wizard is? That's not familiar with that one.
These are people literally making dashboards of data based on, I guess, whatever they want to research and whatever the data is. So there's a lot of like DeFi and yield stuff on there. With Spindle, they're looking for people who have done like marketing and attribution type stuff. So it's like who's visiting a site from Twitter, like who's clicking on these like click-through links and finding your website based on something they're seeing elsewhere. And these are just data scientists and data engineers kind of compiling all this and making it look pretty. And so it's a really good spot for them. It's similar when we used to do like a lot of design hiring, like a Dribble or just someplace you can put like your portfolio. And it's just like a portfolio for data scientists. So I think that's been like a pretty decent hotspot. The downside, again, is that no one uses their real names or locations or anything. So you're kind of just going around in the dark, figuring out who these people are.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of the different research firms looking for people that have compiled like super legit and popular Dune dashboards, and I love them too because it's like the best. It's just the on-chain. It's something like that, something like Nansen, although Nansen is a little bit more like just a kind of a productized version where it's not as crowdsourced per se. But Dune is pretty cool because you could see all of the just like individual dashboards that people make.
Yeah. And so I think that's a lot of what I do is just kind of staying on top of where these people are going to be. And so at the same time, like I said, not a ton of bandwidth. So it'd be great if I could partner with someone who had the time to go through these Dune dashboards and find candidates for people. So it all comes back to making sure you have the right partnerships with people in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of maybe like fear or like lack of education, especially like with some of the resources that are out there for growing teams like a recruiting agency. Like, what are some of the biggest just like misconceptions or pushback that you get from founders?
Pushback is, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, good.
I would say the pushback's always cost, just without a doubt. And I think part of that probably comes from our side on like the VC side, is because every conversation, the first two questions are what's your runway, what's your burn, like how much runway do you have left? If it's below like whatever 12 months, 15 months, like there's concern. So it's like, why would I spend $40,000 to hire someone? And I think that's the wrong way to approach it. Like I said, like if you're hiring the right person, that 40,000 leads to a Series A or leads to you getting your product out sooner. So I think like that's the one thing I want to drive home all the time. And I know I get like really frustrated talking about this because I just don't understand it from the founder perspective as to like, if you can hire someone, why don't you? So so the cost is a big one. The other is I think like not understanding like what value these people can bring. And so I guess like to say that, so what I'm trying to build now, rather than like with all the sourcing I'm doing with like these individual contributor engineers, is I want to build like a bigger advisory type network. So we need people on like the legal side, design side, marketing side, who are like senior folks that have like been there, done that can work as an advisor with these companies. And then I don't know what the incentive is on the company side. I don't know if it's offering advisory shares or some sort of like hourly rate, but legal fees are huge. Like we have legal firms charging like $1,000 an hour for advice. At that point, hire internally or use an advisor or something. So I think the pushback we get is this is so expensive, and it's expensive because you're making it expensive, not because we don't have the resources to help you. So so that's really the big pushback, is cost, like almost 100% of the time.
I saw you posted something fairly recently about job descriptions and how companies can do them better. Why are job descriptions important, and what can founders improve upon with them?
Yeah, great question. So this came up because we've had a lot of portfolio companies, I guess, start to open roles, but the issue is that everything's very generic. And what happens is you get a lot of noise, which you're going to get anyway from job descriptions. I guess I'll caveat this by saying I don't really expect people to make hiring or to do a lot of hiring from job descriptions or make like top tier hires, because most people aren't going to be looking. But going through the process of writing a job description and understanding what you're looking for helps with just the calibration process in general. And so I think just that idea of crafting it and not going to like a chat GPT and saying like, write me an engineering job description. And it's this person needs JavaScript and React. This person needs to have experience with Node. Like why do they need this experience? Like, what is this leading to? And it goes back to that whole, like, what's the outcome that you're looking for from this role? Like, what competencies do they need to have? And where can we give and take? And so I think it's less the actual job description being out there. That said, like, can be a good signal that you're hiring and that you want people, but more so like the founders thinking through, okay, like, would I apply to this job? Does this make sense? Does this get me excited about this company? And I've just seen too many things that just create noise and it's too generic and you don't learn anything about the company or the founders or the job or anything. So it's almost like reverse psychology for the founders. It's write a job description that you would apply to and see if they can come up with something.
I mean, if you look at the job descriptions on LinkedIn for like different openings or crypto jobs, like they're awful. And
right.
Then they're wondering like, oh, we're getting 1,000 applicants, we're overrun with candidates. It's like it's so hard to actually sift through and actually find if someone's good. Like taking the time to actually write a strong description that's very detailed will more than likely actually attract like the candidate that you need. Yeah, I find that interesting, but I feel like it's more so a tool for the internal team as well. So it's like checking back, like, all right, this is exactly what we need in this search. So yeah, definitely crucial to button up this job descriptions as we go into Q3 and Q4.
Yeah, it really informs it, like you said, like the interview process too. It's we were looking for this. Does this person, tick those boxes when we interview them? Like it just makes it easier down the line, just starting with a solid foundation. So, like I said, it's not important for the sake of getting rid of the noise. You're going to get that anyway. It's just so much more important that everyone's internally is on the same page.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that it's all about like putting in the upfront work, and the more like pre-work you do prior to starting a recruiting cycle on a specific position, I feel like it's usually better for you in the long run. Mm-hmm. And it's so refreshing for us to talk to even now early stage founders sometimes who have a like really well fleshed out job description. They have a like hiring matrix. They have a bunch of questions around what they're looking at, how they're looking to pose a role to somebody, and if it's very hard for you or an agency or anybody to figure out, all right, here's who we're going to go recruit if you don't actually have that written down. It's nearly impossible.
Exactly. And I guess to that point, I love seeing companies start to add like what the interview process actually looks like too in their job descriptions or on their website. So we have a few companies in our portfolio that are doing that because I'm stressing it. But as a candidate, I'm just thinking like if I'm applying to jobs right now and given like what the market looks like, and I see people, it's like, I applied to 1,200 jobs in the last month. Like I hadn't heard back. It's why would you do that? But if you know what it looks like, it's like first call is going to be with the hiring manager. Second will be, with the team. Third will be a take home. Like I'm going to mentally prepare for that more. And I'm going to be way more engaged with the company, knowing what I have to do to get that role. So I just feel like there's a lot of improvements that can be made on something that really hasn't been iterated on in a decade or two.
I feel like beyond that too, like I hear from so many people like in interviews and candidates. I made a post about this as well. Is like proper interview etiquette from the communication side of things. I feel like that's where companies lose a lot of candidates, especially on the developer side, right? These guys have 6, 7, 8 interviews at great companies. And if you're not consistently updating these guys with feedback, I feel like you're missing out on a potential gem that could 5, 10x your business. Is that something that you see like or just advising other founders with as well?
Trying to. Yeah, I saw that post, and then same. I wrote one about a month ago about someone I'm working with who went through I think like 7 or 8 like interviews over like a 2.5 month span, and then at the end they said, "Oh, you're too senior for this role. We needed someone more." It's like these are things we could have sussed out. And like going back, like I don't know how Google ever hired people. We like those processes ran forever. We had hiring committee, and people were okay like waiting it out because it was Google. This doesn't work for like your 5-person company right now. So I don't know. I'm also very anti the work trials. And I know there's a lot of crypto companies doing like 1 week long work trials right now. I think that eliminates a lot of potential people and introduces a ton of bias into the process. But it's just be communicative. That solves so many problems in this industry, and it's just not happening. So yeah, completely agree.
The speed of interview process, I think from our end is like speed and immediate or quick feedback seems to be something that a lot of companies can improve upon. Because I think, like you said, it's really difficult to engage a candidate for 2.5 months. And if they are actively on the job market, expect them to not find enough. If they're a great candidate, which hopefully they are, because otherwise why are you interviewing them? But if they're a great candidate, not expect them to make a move in a time faster than that with a company that's more efficient than that.
Yeah, 100%. I think most people would do a better job just having some conviction and just making a decision. And I guess that just comes back to like the top thing that I think we need to look at from founders and from early stage companies, and I'm stealing this from Adam Draper's book that I just read, is just a bias towards action or bias towards movement, I think he said. And so that's the biggest thing for me is make a decision. And again, like I mentioned earlier, like I'd rather have people spend money than go 6 to 8 months. Like I just feel like even if you have to fire someone that you've hired quickly or whatever, like it's still infinitely worse than making or than doing nothing. Like at least you've made a decision, you understand what not to do next time. And yeah, it may look bad for a little bit, but at least, there's some learning going on in that process. So if there's any takeaway from this whole conversation, it's bias towards action.
I don't know where I heard that. I don't think it was Adam Draper recently, but I do like that phrase a lot too. And I think it's something that applies in a lot of avenues, but I think especially in like business leadership, because like you said, I think a lot of going to the point or the story you mentioned with the 2.5 month interview process, that wasn't necessarily because it doesn't take you 2.5 months to figure out that somebody is too senior. It takes you 2.5 months to decide whether or not to make a move on somebody because you're too nervous to say yes or no.
Right.
And that's like the issue. And you could have saved yourself and the candidate probably 1.5 months minimum if you were able to take that action earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, these are like reputable companies in the space too. So I think that's the other thing too, is people see that happening and see that working and try and replicate that as well. But not every company can go through a hiring committee and wait forever to hire someone. So you need to understand sort of where you sit in the ecosystem right now too.
Greg, I feel like you're obviously in a very unique position, like at a VC, working with a bunch of different portcos. What's kind of the overall state of the market in your opinion for hiring right now? I will say, like for us, I definitely feel like it's picking up, which is really exciting. We've been approached by other VC firms, which is a great indication. But curious from your lens and perspective, like what's going on right now?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think it's picking up certainly more than it was like first quarter of this year too. And I have to imagine after we get through summer and people, take their time off and these layoffs, their whatever severance runs out, we'll start to see more too. I'm still not seeing a ton on the non-technical side. And that might be me because I've spoken with other folks who said that like the non-technical hiring is picking back up. They're seeing more on marketing and strategy and ops. I'd love to see more of that, but at least with our companies, which again, it's pre-seed, seed stage, like early stage, it's mostly just technical hiring right now. And I'm still not seeing product manager roles, which is tough because there's a lot of good product managers out there that could use a change of scenery. But as far as engineering talent, yeah, like just a huge demand again for engineering folks. The other trend I'm starting to see is more people requiring on-site versus remote. So that's come up more and more recently. Again, I have my own opinion there. I work fully remote. I think I'm way more effective doing that. That might be the next conversation I have with our founders is they need to stop limiting themselves with the talent pool, because we do have companies that are looking for people specifically in like a Denver or a Cayman Islands or something like that. And that just really limits it when you already have people excited to work, but they want to stay in San Francisco or DC or New York or something. So yeah. I think that'll probably be one of the next things I write about.
Good Could do an entire podcast episode on remote versus in person for early stage hiring.
I have a lot of opinions there. Yeah,
it's a rabbit hole there. I do too, but it's funny because it's like I have my own opinions, but when it comes down to it, it's like it's their company.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to grow it how they want to do it. So my opinions don't really matter as much. And especially as an agency recruiter, it's like whatever you want to do, I'm going to have to do it. So
yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm the same way. So I definitely have like, yeah, I can only advise so much and can only guide so much. I'm not going to force any opinions on them. And I think that's a big thing too, is like, I'm behind our founders' decisions 100%. And I'm going to make sure that we make it work. It doesn't mean I'm not going to judge them for their decisions, but we're going to make it work somehow.
Just wrapping up here. I mean, at this point in time, would love to know if there's anything you want to leave off with. If there's any topics we didn't cover, or if there's any kind of shout out you want to do in terms of your portfolio or what you're working on at this point in time.
Yeah, I'd say the big piece that I want to touch on is just like always be interviewing, and that's I've certainly like hired more people or not. I've placed more people like opportunistically than from actual open roles. And so we talk about the importance of job descriptions, maybe not. Definitely have seen more people get hired and work at companies just from having like initial conversations and founders being open to that. And I get that, founders want to be heads down and building, but like people that are excited about your product could be, potential coworkers or customers or angel investors or something. And so like I think that there's a couple things that I try and stress with our founders, but that's a big one. Is just like, if I'm introducing someone to you that like says they're excited about your project, take 15, 30 minutes and talk to them, because you have no idea what's going to happen there. And certainly like the biggest wins I had at A16Z on the hiring side came from just like, hey, like founder, like Hayden, just meet this person and see if, you jibe with them. And so that's the big piece of advice for founders. In terms of what I'm working on and in chapter 1 and whatnot, like I said, like I'm continuing to just build this advisor pool now. So more senior folks, people who have been like in that VP director level at a Web2 company who are like curious about Web3, I'd be happy to chat. Like again, it's a lot of education and just, this is an exciting place to be still. So there's been just a lot of noise and bear market and whatnot the last 6 months, but I still feel like all the best talent in the world is in this space right now. The people who are doing things in this space have like a lot of conviction, and the bear market maybe scared a bunch of people out, and maybe that was a good thing. So yeah, I'm still as bullish as ever on Web3.
Love it. I mean, you guys heard it here first. There's no better place to be than Web3 right now. And Greg, you're definitely one of the top leaders in talent. So I really appreciate you coming on and dropping so much wisdom. I think we've been connected now for almost a year.
Yeah.
David made that introduction. Shout out to David. And it's just exciting to follow your journey. And I'm stoked to see what chapter 1 has in store for the rest of the year.
Yeah, appreciate that. And likewise, like so much respect for everything Proof of Talent has done, just literally building like the preeminent, like arguably top, recruiting agency in the space in a few short years. And same thing, Rob and I were connected prior to Proof of Talent at A16Z. So shout out to Jesse Walden over at Variant for making that intro. And just seeing this grow over the last few, or I guess probably 3 or 4 years at this point, has just been incredible. So really excited, and again, appreciate the time and being able to kind of just rant on what I see.
Yeah, thanks so much, Greg.
Awesome. Thank you.